Your work boots have a hole starting in the left toe. Not a big one, just enough that your sock gets damp when you walk through the parking lot after it rains, and you keep meaning to replace them, and you keep not replacing them because they've still got maybe a year left in them if you're careful about where you step and which puddles you avoid on the way to the time clock. You make $40,212 a year before taxes. You know the number exactly because it's printed on the pay stub you glance at every other Friday, folded once, tucked into the console of your car, forgotten by Monday. It's not a bad number, it's not a good number either. It's just the number that shows up on paper when someone asks what you do for a living, the number that decides which box you check on a form, the number people use to guess who you are before they've met you. Your net worth is $3, $4 million. Nobody in your life would guess that from looking at you. Not your manager who signs your timesheet without reading it. Not the guy at the parts counter who knows your name and asks about your knee. Not your sister who still asks if you need gas money before family dinners, gently, the way you ask a sibling something you're not sure how to ask. The number didn't arrive with a parade. It arrived the way most true numbers do, quietly, in a spreadsheet, on a Tuesday night, while you were thinking about your boots and whether the left one would make it through winter. The levels don't feel like levels when you're inside them. Somewhere between the first $10,000 and the last $3 million, the fear just wore off a little at a time, and what was left underneath it, once the fear was gone, was only math. Everything eventually just becomes Tuesday. The strange part is you can't point to the day it happened. There was no threshold you remember crossing, no balance that made you sit up straighter in your chair. You've gone back through the spreadsheet more than once looking for it. Some tab, some month, some row where the number should have felt different than the row above it. And there isn't one. It just kept climbing quietly underneath a life that looked, from every angle anyone could see, exactly the same as it did the year before. Tyler worked the shift next to yours for 2 years before he transferred to the other warehouse. Same job title, same hourly rate down to the cent, same 40-hour weeks stacked on top of each other like the pallets you both moved. But Tyler drove a black F-150 that was still 6 years from being paid off, with a lift kit that added nothing to its function and everything to how it looked pulling into the lot at 6 a.m. Tyler's phone was always the newest one, upgraded the week it launched, financed in a way that felt to him like it wasn't really a cost at all. Tyler's girlfriend posted pictures from a trip to Cancun that Tyler was still paying off in installments 11 months later, a little at a time, quietly, the way debt likes to be paid. The truck payment is $687 a month. That's not a truck payment. That's 41 hours of pre-sold labor, gone before the first shift of the pay period even starts, gone before Tyler's alarm goes off on Monday. The phone is another 6 hours, financed over 24 months at a rate nobody reads the fine print on. The watch he wears, the one that isn't a real one but looks close enough under warehouse lighting, is 9 more hours, borrowed against a future that hasn't clocked in yet. Add it up, and by the time Tyler badges into the building on a Monday morning, a real chunk of his week is already spent. Mortgaged out to companies that will never know his name, pulled automatically from a checking account he stopped checking a long time ago because checking it only made him feel worse. You used to think Tyler had more than you. For a while, everyone on the floor did. He looked like the guy who was winning. He parked closer to the door, metaphorically, than the rest of the shift, even though the actual parking spots were assigned by seniority and had nothing to do with any of this. But somewhere around your second year, you started noticing something else instead. Not what Tyler had, but what he owed against having it. You started doing the time pricing without meaning to, converting price tags into hours the way some people convert currencies on vacation. The truck wasn't a truck. It was a slice of every future Monday, sold in advance. A parking lot full of gleaming financed trucks is really just a parking lot full of borrowed weeks, all lined up in neat rows, catching the same fluorescent light, none of them fully owned by anyone standing in that lot. There's a second contrast character, quieter than Tyler, that took you longer to notice because he never said much about it. Dave from Receiving leased a jet ski 2 summers ago, put it on a trailer, hauled it to the lake every weekend he could, wasn't loud about any of it the way Tyler was loud. But the jet ski cost $11,400 financed at a rate that made your stomach turn when he mentioned it once in passing. And the trailer was another loan stacked on top of that. And the truck to pull the trailer was leased too, a 3-year term he was already 2 years into with nothing to show for it at the end but the option to lease something newer. You did the hours on that one too, out of habit more than judgment. The jet ski alone was 680 hours of post-tax labor. Not a summer, not a season, Almost 17 full work weeks gone, financing 4 months a year of something he used maybe a dozen times before the excitement wore thin and the payments didn't. He still has it. Hess still paying for it. He talks about selling it sometimes, in the break room, the way people talk about diets that start on Monday and never quite do. Sunday mornings, before anyone else in the apartment complex is awake, you sit at the small folding table by the window with a cup of coffee that cost 14 cents to make, made in a machine you bought used off a coworker for $8 4 years ago, and you open 3 tabs on a laptop that's older than your relationship with the girl 2 doors down. One tab is a brokerage account. One is a spreadsheet you've maintained, unbroken since your 2nd year at the warehouse. One is nothing, just a blank note where you type whatever's bothering you so it stops rattling around in your head before the week starts. You audit the small stuff first because the small stuff is where most people bleed without noticing. A forgotten $6.99 subscription for an app you used twice in 2023 and never opened again. A bank fee that shouldn't exist, charged because you dipped below a minimum balance you didn't know you had. You cancel, you adjust, you close the tab. None of it is dramatic. None of it will ever be a headline. It's the financial equivalent of checking the oil, something you do so quietly that even you sometimes forget you're doing it. The actual mechanism is simpler than anyone wants it to be, and simpler than most people are willing to accept, because simple doesn't sell anything. Every paycheck, before you see a cent of it, 34% of it leaves automatically and goes somewhere that isn't your checking account. It's been set up that way for 9 years, since a Sunday, almost exactly like this one, sitting at a different table in a different apartment when you decided once, not every 2 weeks, just once, and then built a system so your willpower never had to vote on it again. You don't decide to save money on a good week when the re's extra, and you don't decide to save it on a bad week when there isn't. The system doesn't ask. It doesn't know your mood. It doesn't know you almost bought new boots last Tuesday and talked yourself out of it in the checkout line. Not because you couldn't afford them, but because some habits outlive the reasons you built them. The growth doesn't happen on the good weeks or the bad weeks. It happens in the flat, grey stretch between them, the part nobody films, the part that looks, from the outside, exactly like nothing happening at all. 9 years of Sundays, 9 years of 14-cent coffee and cancelled subscriptions and a number in a spreadsheet that ticks upwards in increments too small to notice week to week, the way a tide comes in without ever announcing a single wave. Nobody claps for a Roth IRA contribution. Nobody films the moment you set an automatic transfer for $340 a month and forget about it. Boring was never the obstacle here. Boring was the whole qualification, the entrance fee nobody wants to pay because it doesn't look like anything is happening while you pay it. After the spreadsheet, there's usually a second, smaller ritual, the kind you'd never mention to anyone because it sounds like nothing when you say it out loud. You reread one page from a library book on index funds you've already read 4 times, not because you need new information, but because rereading it is a way of confirming the plan still makes sense, the way some people check a locked door twice before bed, even though they know it's locked. Then you write down one number in a notebook, not the balance, just the percentage that went to savings that month. And you close the notebook, and you make breakfast. 2 eggs, the same 2 eggs, because breakfast has never once been the place you needed to prove anything to anyone. The email goes out on a Thursday morning at 8:41. Subject line: Operational Restructuring. Facility Update. Everyone on the floor reads it standing up, phones out, forklift idling, because nobody wants to be the last one to know what's happening to their own life. 40 jobs across the 2 warehouses. Not layoffs exactly. The company is careful with the word, careful the way companies are careful right before they do the thing the word describes, but a reduction in redundant roles effective end of quarter, worded by someone in an office none of you have ever seen, in a building 3 states away. Tyler's name is on the list, so is yours. Same storm, different boats, you watch it happen in real time across the break room, the fluorescent light doing nothing to soften anyone's face. Tyler's goes the colour of the vending machine behind him. Hare's doing math out loud, fast, the kind of math people do when the numbers were never supposed to be tested this hard. The truck payment, the phone, the trip he's still paying off, the girlfriend who doesn't know yet and won't until tonight. Someone asks if he has savings and he laughs, but it isn't really a laugh. It's just the sound a person makes when he has nothing else to do with their face. You go quiet too, but it's a different kind of quiet. Not shock, something closer to relief, and then a flash of guilt about the relief. And then just stillness, the kind you've practiced without meaning to. You already know what your number looks like without this job. You've known for years, actually, because you built the spreadsheet for exactly this moment without ever fully admitting, even to yourself, that this is what you were quietly preparing for. The surprise still has a comma in it. 40 jobs is 40 jobs, and yours is one of them. And there's a version of this morning where that fact alone would have taken your legs out from under you. But a system was already standing there, arms out, 9 years deep, ready to absorb the blow before the email had even finished loading on your phone. You read the same sentence Tyler read. It just landed somewhere different. By lunch, the break room has split into two conversations happening at once. The way a room does when the news is the same, but the reactions aren't. On one side, people are talking severance packages and unemployment filing dates and whether the union rep is going to fight the redundant roles language. On the other side, quieter, is Marlene, who hasn't said much, refilling her coffee like it's any other Thursday. You end up standing near her without quite meaning to, and she looks at you and says only, "You'll be fine." Not a question, not really even reassurance, just an observation, the kind someone makes when they've already clocked something about you that you haven't said out loud to anyone. Marlene runs the parts counter. She's 58. She's worked at the warehouse 11 years. And she drives a Corolla with a cracked windshield she keeps saying she'll fix, the same way you keep saying you'll fix the boots. Nobody thinks twice about Marlene. She brings the same lunch every day in the same insulated bag, and she has a laugh that carries across the whole floor when something actually strikes her as funny, which isn't often, but when it happens, everyone hears it. 3 weeks after the layoffs, you're at the counter picking up a part for one last job before your own last day, and you notice the watch on her wrist for the first time. It isn't flashy. It doesn't announce itself the way Tyler's phone does, or the way the guy from corporate's car does when he visits twice a year. But it's real, the kind of thing that costs more than most people's monthly rent, sitting quietly under a flannel sleeve like it has nowhere it needs to be seen and no one it needs to impress. You ask about it because you can't help it, because the question's been sitting on your tongue since you clocked in. She looks at you for a second like she's deciding whether you're actually asking or just making conversation, then decides you're actually asking and tells you. She bought it in cash 4 years ago, the week she paid off the rental property she'd owned since her 30s, free and clear. Not before, not as motivation, not as a reward promised in advance to keep herself going through a hard stretch. After, once the freedom was already fully funded, already sitting in her name with nothing owed against it. She says something that stays with you the rest of the shift, said plainly, the way she says most things. That the watch was never meant to tell anyone else anything. It wasn't a signal, wasn't a flare, wasn't a way of being seen. It was a private receipt, proof, for herself alone, of a debt, actual and otherwise, that no longer existed. You look down at your own bare wrist and understand for the first time in any way that actually sinks in, that the goal was never to look like you'd made it. The goal was to actually make it quietly on your own schedule and then decide, if you ever decided anything about it at all, whether the world needed to know or whether the knowing could just belong to you. Later that week you find out from someone else that Marlene turned down a promotion into a salaried supervisor role 3 years ago, one that would have meant more money and worse hours and a desk instead of a counter. Nobody could figure out why at the time. They figured she just liked the counter, liked knowing every regular's part number by heart, and maybe that was part of it. But you understand it differently now. Shed already funded her own freedom. The promotion wasn't a ladder for her anymore. It was just a longer set of hours attached to a title she didn't need. The call comes at 2:17 in the morning, the way calls like that always seem to. Your mother's neighbour, not your mother, because your mother can't get to the phone herself. A fall on the kitchen floor. The hospital, words like stable, and we're not sure yet strung together in a voice trying to sound calmer than it actually is, the way people do when they're the one who has to make the call. You are 3 states away, in a bed that isn't yours anymore in an apartment you will be out of by the 15th, phone lighting up the ceiling. There is a version of this night, the one you lived for years before the spreadsheet, before the automatic transfers, before Marlene's watch or any of the rest of it, where the next hour is spent doing math instead of driving. Checking a balance you're afraid to check, weighing a flight against a car payment that's already tight this month, calling someone to ask if they can cover a shift, then calling someone else to ask if they can cover you, all of it stacked on top of the fear about your mother, doubling the weight of the night. That version doesn't happen tonight. You book the first flight out, whatever it costs, without opening a single app to check if you can afford it. You already know you can. You know it the way you know your own name, without having to think about it first. The number simply doesn't attend the moment. It doesn't get a seat in the room. For the entire drive to the airport, in the dark, at 3 a.m, past gas stations and closed strip malls and one lone semi-truck idling at a red light with nobody else around, your mind holds exactly one thing, and it isn't money. It's your mother's kitchen floor, and whether she was scared, and how long it took someone to find her. This is the part nobody puts in the spreadsheet, the part no line item ever captures. The whole architecture, the automatic transfers, the boring Sundays, the 14-cent coffee, 9 years of a system running quietly in the background while you clocked in and out of a job that paid $40,212 a year. It was never really about the $3.4 million sitting in an account somewhere. It was about buying back your own attention on the one night when someone you love needed all of it, undivided, unmortgaged, uninterrupted by arithmetic. Money's highest job was never to announce itself in a parking lot or on a wrist. It was to disappear completely, right when it mattered most, so that nothing, no fear, no math, no calculation about what you could or couldn't afford, stood between you and the people who needed you whole. Your mother is fine. A cracked wrist, a scare, a week in a brace, a lot of casseroles from neighbors who clearly know how to organize a schedule. You fly home 4 days later, back to boots with a hole in the toe you still haven't replaced, back to a $40,212 job that no longer technically exists because the restructuring went through while you were gone. Quietly, on schedule, the way these things always do. Your last paycheck clears on a Friday like every one before it, and you fold it once and set it on the counter, and it doesn't feel like an ending, because it isn't one. It's just another folded piece of paper in a life built almost entirely out of ordinary ones. 2 weeks later, you're standing in a hardware store aisle of all places, looking at boots, actually looking this time instead of just thinking about it. You pick a pair up, check the sole, put it back, pick up another. It occurs to you, standing there under the same kind of fluorescent lighting that's been over every important and unimportant moment of the last 9 years, that you could buy any boots in this store without checking a single number first. You buy the same brand you've always worn. Habits, once they're load-bearing, don't get replaced just because the ceiling on them disappears. Math never fixes a Monday morning. It never makes the boots less wet, or the layoff email less cold at 8:41 a.m., or the sound of a neighbor's voice at 2:17 a.m., any less frightening in the moment it happens. What it does, if you build it right and leave it alone long enough for 9 quiet years, is make sure that when the real storms come, the ones with commas in them, the ones that arrive in the dark without warning, you get to walk through them with your whole mind instead of half of it, spent, worried, doing arithmetic instead of driving. The number was never measuring the money. It was measuring how much of your attention the fear used to occupy hour by hour, Monday by Monday, for years before you noticed it shrinking. And now that most of that fear is gone, priced out, paid off, quietly absorbed into a spreadsheet nobody else has ever seen, what's actually left to build once the worry finally stops taking up all the